Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 159, and I'm continuing with the story of the second calendar from 1001 Arabian Nights. Now, you might remember where we left off. The genie had come to where the prince lived with the tailor. The prince had fled from the scene of, his disaster making, having kicked the talisman that would summon the genie. He fled for his life, and he heard as he did the moans and shrieks of the princess, as the genie was obviously taking his wrath out on her. Well, the tailor was happy to see him because he'd been gone for quite a long time, and he retired to his room, and then the genie came, bringing his axe and his shoes that he had left behind. When the tailor came to the prince's door and told him that an old man was there with his shoes and axe, the prince began to tremble. His legs began to shake. And he made his way out of the door and started down the stairs. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, before he could even open the door, the genie, who must have grown impatient at waiting, the door was there. The floor just disappeared for a second right in front of the prince, and out from that void, the genie appeared, standing before him. And he said, "I am a genie, and I am the son of the daughter of Eblis." Now, Eblis was basically the king of the genies, so he was the prince of the genies. And he said, "Are these shoes and this axe yours?" And the prince couldn't even get the words out to say yes. He couldn't respond. He was so much in fear of now what was taking place. It was otherworldly. Even though he had boasted of having no fear of genies, boasted of wiping them out, it was clear that he was dealing with a force that was beyond his ability to reckon with. And before he could say anything, the genie snatched him into his arms and leapt up into the air. They went right through the second floor, right through the roof, without harming it in any way, and so high up into the air that the prince felt that he would lose consciousness. And then the genie turned, and coming back at a rate that was unfathomable, he just plummeted toward the earth. And when they came to a stop, the prince found himself in the underground chamber where he had met the princess of the Ebony Isles. There she was on the floor, but in a state that was so different than the one that he had met her. She was beaten, she was bloody in places, and just looked half dead. And when the genie and the prince arrived, the genie turned toward the princess, even though she was laying on the floor. And he said, "Here, isn't this your love?" And she looked at the prince and said, "No, I've never seen him." And the genie was he clearly knew what was going on. He yelled out that she was a liar. And then he said, "Well, if you don't know him, then take this saber and chop off his head." And the princess said, I am too weak to even lift it. And why? Why, if I don't know this man, would I ever kill him? Fine, said the genie. And he turned to the prince. And he said, do you know this woman? And the prince, he had decided to go along with the same response that the princess had. He said, no, I have never seen her. He said, well then, if you've never seen her, take this saber and cut off her head. She's a stranger to you. What should it matter? Well, he picked up the saber and he said, fine, I will. And he turned to look at the princess and give her an acknowledgement of do not worry, because his plan was to take his own life. But when he looked at the princess, what she communicated in her eyes left him absolutely bewildered, because she looked at him with gratitude, hoping that he would lop off her head and free her from this torture that she was living in. And when the prince saw this, he said, fie upon you, to the genie. He said, I may be in your power, but I will not do your wretched command. And he threw the saber onto the floor. The genie turned toward the princess and said, here's the cause of all your sorrows. And you're going to continue to pretend that you don't know this man. And you, he turned to the prince, are going to continue as well. Yeah, I will show you where it will get you, he said. And with this, he picked up the saber. Well, I won't describe what he did to the princess, but it was clear that her life was at an end, and she bid with her hand a farewell wave to the prince. And then the genie turned toward the prince and said, I am not going to kill you, but I will make you miserable. You can decide what form you'd like to take. Fish, dog, pig, cow. I will change you into something, and you can decide. Well, the prince looked at the genie and said, why don't you spare me? Why don't you have pity on me? Have you not caused me trouble for no reason? Is your anger just? Why don't you let me go? Free me. Free me. Just as the story of the two neighbors, the one envious of the other, that proud man, he gave all he could to his envious neighbor, despite him being filled with anger and wrath. Why don't you do the same for me? Free me. Let me have my freedom. It won't harm you. Do you even know the story? The prince said to the genie. The genie stopped for a minute. I don't know the story. Perhaps you can tell it to me. And perhaps you will gain a few minutes in the form that you are in. So the calendar turned towards Sabeda and said, I hope that you will enjoy this story too. And with that, Scheherazade ended the story for that day. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Thanks for joining.